Firstly, before we talk about meditation, understand that your being is made up of three beings. You have a physical body, an emotional body, and a spiritual body.
John,
What's
good
up,
morning.
brother?
How's it going, dude?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Well, very well, thanks. I feel like we've already had a mini podcast before recording this audio
Right.
on the way in, and I feel it's still 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:20. We're down here at Seva Experience, which is a beautiful, conscious place. It's nice always to be here to be reminded of being aware of your surroundings and kind of like reflect really on yourself and the surroundings as well. So it's really amazing to be in this space and have these conversations with you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure. What a great venue, and well done for choosing it. And I think every time we've connected, it always seems like a podcast.
Yeah,
and but we met by mistake, and immediately there was this sort of deep sort of conversation that was created.
I think there's probably like a lesson to maybe highlight in the way that we've met, because we've met in the middle of a rave, I would say, like or a party, and and out of, I guess, 1,000 people or so, we connected through a friend, and you were 2 days out from showing up to our podcast, and that was the last time.
And you started explaining to me your company name. I was like, I know that company name. I'm going to be on a podcast and a company name. He's like, I'm interviewing you. I'm like, no way. Yeah, fantastic.
I think the way that the universe brings people together is really nice, and the timing sometimes is very important, right? So yeah, man. So thanks a lot for coming, and for everybody that doesn't know you, do you want to tell everybody what you do, the things that you're involved in general?
Sure. Well, I'm fascinated with evolving myself and evolving my impact on the world and accessing my genius. And I think we all have this incredible power within us. And somehow the stories we've been told and the indoctrination we've had is that we don't have access to it. And so throughout my life, I've gone through this process of being an eager seeker. And from a very, very young age, I remember myself just wanting to meditate at 12 years old when there was nobody around. I mean, this was BG, right? So before Google. So it was years ago. And so there was nobody could... BG, it's made up. So this fascination with evolving has led me to become an author of 3 books, a lecturer and faculty at Singularity University in San Francisco, an associate partner for Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies in Denmark, and also a podcast host, a brain trust host, and have my own career as a keynote speaker that's really doing well. And what I do is I combine the concepts of human psychology, quantum science, futurism, and business strategy. And nobody else is actually combining them like I am. So there's always a unique message, unique stories that enthuses, builds courage and clarity for organizations, decision makers, and leaders inside organizations. So my career has really done well because of this sort of mix and mash of my unique combination and fascination of subjects.
For sure, and I think the common denominator there is the human element, right? It's like whether you're driving a business forward, whether you're driving the quantum physics elements, or it's how all of these different elements affect the human condition. In a way.
Look, I think the one thing we all have in common is our humanity. And so whether you're a leader or talking about a consumer or talking about an employee, you're talking about a human. And so why doesn't your management team build a new perspective? Human behavior. Why can't you understand your consumer better, or how do you get your consumer better, or how do you create a better culture? Human behavior. So what usually happens is that many people get stuck in business strategy or in futurism, but if you don't know how to shift your perspective, if you don't know how to let go of your past, if you don't know how to redesign what you think success looks like in this new changing world, it doesn't matter how much you know about business strategy and futurism. It's actually irrelevant. So for me, the process of getting to the point of really researching quantum science has been led by me being so fascinated with the future as an early adopter from a very young age, and then moving into the place where realizing that no matter what you tell organizations about the future, if they don't have the psychology, it's not pointless. And then what creates the depth of psychology is quantum science. And so what brings you to the point of taking responsibility for your reality creation without feeling too pressured? And that's based on human psychology and memories. And so it's been a whirlwind of discovery for me, because I've wanted to upgrade myself. And there's a great saying by Yogi Bhajan. He says, if you want to learn something, read about it. If you want to understand something, write about it. If you want to master something, teach it. And so the process of putting myself as a thought leader in this space has made me much better sort of
students of the
of the subject,
yeah,
of the subject
itself,
matter.
for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I mean, in general, you know, when we look at friends and, you know, to kind of like bring it down to relatable elements where people change, you know, in general, like we go through changes, we go through evolution of ourselves. There's version 1, version 2, version 3, and it keeps going. And I feel like that's the reason why the measure of success would be different for people from one year to the next. Even the way that an organization could see success in certain markets, certain market conditions would be different. At the moment, while we're recording this, you know, unfortunately the corona is pretty hitting the world heavily. There's a lot of fear around it, and at the moment I feel like for a lot of the businesses, success is staying afloat. You know what I mean? Instead of thriving, instead of actually making those massive margins of profit, right now the success is, can we operate this business from home? Can we just stay afloat? And it's amazing how the perspective really changes when it comes to, you know, what is success? That just answer to that question, and that could be from a business level or from a human element level. And staying in tune with that evolution process is important. But maybe to talk a little bit about the amount of time that we reflect. You said that, you know, starting at 12 years old, you wanted to meditate, and you had that urge to meditate. I've only started exploring that area when I've had some losses, and I've only really got somehow induced to the thought of meditation through using tools that helped me be comfortable with the space of meditation. So, you know, a lot of us might be listening to this and might have thoughts in their mind that they don't really want to face, and like fears and shadows that they don't really want to be dealing with. So, have you had tools or practices that have helped you face those shadows and face those fears?
Well, I think the first thing you want to do is you want to get to understand that the life that you're living and the perspective that you have is built on memories. And those memories are built on your experiences of life while you're growing up. And what starts to happen is you get so entrenched and so deeply into your own psyche, you think that the world that you're living in is just the norm and that's just the way it is. And it's actually not at all. They're all based on these prejudices that we've developed, these stories that we tell ourselves. And so the first thing you want to do is realize that the world you're living is based on a set of perspectives, based on a set of memories, based on a set of beliefs that are only unique to you, based on your upbringing and your parents and your lineage and all those sort of things. Because a lot of people say, there's nothing wrong with my life. And I'm like, dude, there's nothing. Yeah, you're conditioned to think there's nothing. You know, I bought my mom and dad 3 packages of coaching. And my mom said to me, thank you so much, son. I love you so much, but there's nothing wrong with my life. And I said, Mom, there's nothing wrong with your life. It could be much better, but you don't realize that it could be much better until you actually do the research. So the first thing I think anybody that's listening to this must realize, the condition that you're in can change, should change, can be better, and should be better. For yourself, people around you, to create more seamless abundance in your life. Because if you think about it, all we want as human beings is more seamlessness in our lives with no friction points, more abundance so we can do what we want, when we want, how we want, and with who we want, in a much calmer, more collaborative world. In fact, every human being would want that for themselves, for their families, and for people around them. So how do we get to that state? And so first question, can I get to that state? Is it possible for me? And then what happens is that the tools that arrive for you specifically become your tools, because the universe gives you messages in the way you understand them, not in the way I understand them. So a lot of people ask me these questions. So John, what are the tools that you use? And for me, the teachers that have arrived in my world have always been very specific to the way I needed to learn. So the ones I've used very heavily have been meditation, because I think the thing with meditation is that you have to spend time with yourself, and that's scary. And a lot of people don't want to spend time with themselves, you know. And if you think of Vipassana or 10 days in a dark room by yourself, which both of them really scare me, which I still have to tackle, and I will, but it's spending time with yourself. And that noise or voice that you have internally is very scary. So meditation's the one.
For sure. And I feel like in the modern age, the immediate response to spending time with yourself is pick up your phone, right?
Yes.
Like you pick up your phone, you just want some kind of busyness. You want to keep your mind engaged.
Right.
And I feel like there's a bit of an addiction now for people to kind of just have some kind of stimulus running through their mind to avoid spending time with themselves. But I completely agree about how your unique experience will serve you the tools that you need that are going to be relatable to your condition, your timing, your situation as well, to move you. But I feel like, and maybe now I'm speaking about some friends that I have in mind, is they know that they want to change. They know they could live a better life, a more abundant life, but there is the misconception about their environment that, you know, what are people going to think about me, or, you know, the judgment, fear of judgment, and letting go of that fear as well is part of your evolution process. So, you know, from my experience, I think the first thing I had to tackle was letting go of the judgment, and whether that's being on stage and performing, or whether that's, you know, deciding to leave a career after 11 years and picking up a camera and saying, hey, I'm going to be a camera guy. You know what I mean? Like that just mindset and ego. And as soon as I built the link between that and the ego, I'm like, wait a minute. Like, how can I work with this ego thing? What is this ego thing? And learn a little bit more about it. So what was your journey in terms of understanding the ego and tackling the ego?
Well, look, I think the ego is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the ego must ever be looked at being killed or taken out. It's about being managed.
Sure.
And so to understand what that ego can do, how it can do it, and are you the master or the slave of your ego? So this whole thing that you must kill your ego death, I'm like, no. Integrate ego, integrate, you know, be kind, you know, and also don't be reactive, and realize that you are a set of patterns, behaviors, habits, and rituals, and those are all based on beliefs, memories, and stories, you know. It's such a deep process of prejudices that we've built, you know, for ourselves. So conditioning, exactly. So look, I think the question is great, but I'd rather focus in on the fact of, are you more focused on who you want to be, on who you used to be? And that becomes the question that you need to tackle. And so what your ego wants to do is keep itself safe and sound in who you were. Because your ego doesn't want to be challenged and says, look, the way you think about this is not actually right. You need to think about it differently. Your ego will immediately go, oh, no, because I don't want to change anything, because I'm comfortable. Even though I'm unhappy, I'm just comfortable being here. I don't want to bring anything new. And so what the biggest challenge comes in is, are you more focused on who you want to be or who you were? And the ego is going to keep you in who you were. So for me, it was about, how much clarity do you have? How much potential do you have? How much audacity do you have in designing who you want to become? And most people are scared of that. And so most people will shy away from that big, audacious, hairy goal of who you can become, because they feel they're not worthy, they feel it's too much, they feel that it's not for them. So there's so many stories that we tell ourselves, and guess what? These stories are the ego. That's the story, you know? So the ego wants to keep itself safe in exactly where it's at. And so for me, is your identity more linked to who you were, who you need to become? That's it. That becomes the beginning and end of you tracking your progress, growth, and also realizing how much time, effort, money are you going to put into becoming who you want to be. Because if you don't have clarity there, then there's no point doing it.
True. And it's almost this like story that we craft, or that we will need to craft for ourselves, and have full ownership and belief in it. Like, we need to believe our new version of ourselves before it even exists. Yeah. When basketball players talk about, you know, visualizing their game, visualizing their life, visualizing their future. So that's also part of it. Are you visualizing yourself 2 years from now, 2 months from now, you know, 1 week from now, or even like the new tomorrow, and you know, understanding that and really adopting that as part of yourself. For me, at least, that's how I started changing. And you know, I remember when we were kids, the idea of being rock stars was, you know, just laughable, and everybody around us was like, "Are you crazy?" So, and you know, it was fun. You know, maybe we didn't become massive rock stars, but we still had fun on the journey. And it's understanding that even if you didn't get to the destination, it's the journey. Because sometimes you will pivot. Sometimes you realize that actually this story, I need to adjust it a little bit, and I need to change and go somewhere else. But I've picked up 2-3 skill set along the way, and that'll help me onto the next journey. And at the end of the day, like, we're journeyers. Like, we're humans. We've got this journey we're going through. This is the Earth version. Tomorrow's going to be another galaxy version. Like, we don't know, right? And I feel like that's something that, you know, people who are so ingrained with the life on Earth, and like, this is the only thing. There's a lot of anxiety that becomes about change and about, you know, security and stability, because like, they're afraid that it's just becomes too much.
Well, look, I think let's break this down a little bit. One, why is it that most people can describe their next holiday in more detail than they can describe their reality? And you know, it's such a massive concept, because if you're going to China, well, let's not say China now, but let's say you're going to Greece on holiday, and you know what flight you're catching, what visas you need. It's like, well, it's a prejudice because nobody's going to China now. I mean, so like, there's no flights to China. So if you want to swim to China, so the thing is you can describe your trip to Greece and what hotel you're staying at in such detail, and you can't do that for your own life and where you want to go because you don't have that audacity to do that. And also the thing for me is that it's a script that you're writing. It's a movie script. And I know a lady actually that wrote a movie script 8 years ago about a woman that went through a process of losing everything and reinventing herself. And while she was telling me about the movie script, she started crying and she said, I didn't realize I've just written my whole life. And her own life became the movie script that she had written, quite literally. She lost everything and she went through the process of reinvention, you know, and she's doing really well now. But I think as human beings, when we get stuck into quantum science, we start to realize that reality is subjective. It's happening through us, not to us. When Newtonian science told us that reality was objective, was just outside of us and we had no control over it. So that becomes the crux of all my work right now is, look, reality is not happening to us, it's happening through us. Can you take the responsibility for actually thinking bigger, bolder, and more creatively? Or are you going to be stuck in who you were and where you come from?
Yeah, and we're storytellers, right? Like at the end of the day, we believe in stories, we listen to stories, and we tell stories.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a beautiful element to understand, because that's going to be an anchor in the stories we tell ourselves.
Yes.
Subconsciously, you know, there's the affirmations, and at the end of the day, there are things we're trying to like make ourselves believe in.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a very strong tool. So maybe bringing it back a little bit to self-awareness and meditation and the practice as maybe a stepping stone in, you know, designing your future life. You know, a lot of people maybe not taking it religiously, but you know, maybe through prayer, maybe through sports and different modalities, that they feel that meditative state.
Yeah.
You know, when they go through it. So you don't have to really sit and breathe and practice meditation in that form, but I guess the question here is, like, for people who have never done meditation. And want to start slowly, and they've got that anxiety of spending time with themselves. You know, is there any advice? Like, what's the first thing?
So let's firstly, before we talk about meditation, understand that your being is made up of three beings. You have a physical body, an emotional body, and a spiritual body. And what you have to do is you have to recalibrate each one of these. What you eat, how you train, how you move, how your body is in a world needs to be looked at and need to be sort of tweaked and recalibrated. Then your emotional state is, what are your links and memories to your past, your mother-father relationship, your relationship with money, with power, with masculinity, with femininity. All these things are emotional beings. And then what you have is spiritual body. And so what's your spiritual body doing? What's your connection like to yourself, to your higher self, to your soul, to your God, whatever it may be? And so if you aren't able to break these three categories down, because what most people do is they get stuck in physical. Do I look good? Do I, you know? And that's what Instagram gives us an opportunity to share. And so that becomes the thing that most people fix it and focus on. And then they never fix their mother-father relationships, and they keep repeating behaviors and patterns without even realize they're doing it. So you have to break those down. So let's just break those three down. But if you come down to meditation, the one, I suppose, statement that a lot of people say that kind of makes me laugh is that meditation is not for me. My brain's just too busy. And so, and so in my response to that is, oh, are you trying to say my brain's just quiet and slow, so I can do it because I'm stupid and you're too clever? And obviously not. And just like anything that we develop within ourselves takes practice. And so just if you had to run a marathon, you have to practice. And meditation's exactly the same. So my advice is this. One, start with 2 minutes, 2 times a day. Just 2 minutes. And just don't give yourself this goal of 20 minutes. And don't give yourself this goal to become a monk over a couple of weeks. Yeah. Just start with 2 minutes. And what starts to happen is your brain synapses need to start relaxing into this mode, just like you would start with a 1 kilometer run, not a 10 kilometer run. So start with that. Now, there's so many different meditation apps and modalities that you can follow. I'm a big Joe Dispenza fan, and Dr. Joe Dispenza, for me, is able to bring me into a meditative state through a process of guided meditations, and they're scientifically proven to take your brain through different brain states and put you into a theta brain state, which is between dream, sleeping and awake. So for me, that's my tool. And I utilize these meditations and meditation circles as often as possible, in fact, maybe twice a day at times. But for me, it's like, if you're seeking it, the teacher arrives. And if you're not seeking it, and if you don't think anything's problem, of course it won't arrive. So, you know, I don't have time for meditation. It's because you're not seeking. I don't have time for that stuff because you're not really looking. But if you look, stuff arrives. So for me, is start with 2 minutes a day, twice a day. Use guided, use an app. There's so many modalities, but understand that when you start becoming sort of creating the space to spend time with yourself, magic starts to happen. And so just give yourself the luxury, because you know what, you deserve it.
Starting slow is definitely the easier approach when adopting any kind of new habits. And once it becomes a new habit, then it forms within your day-to-day system, and then that becomes the perfect way to integrate a new practice, right? Building it into a habit.
Well, look, your mind is your personality, which is made up of behaviors, which is made up of habits, which is made up of rituals. So you are a machine made up of minute by minute, moment by moment rituals. Whether it's the way you think, the way you act, or the way you eat, those rituals become who you are. And so people want to change their personalities and they get overwhelmed, so they don't even try. And I always say, don't start with a big prize, start with one ritual. The one ritual where you see somebody who's successful, and instead of going, that would never be me, or that person has to be a thief to be successful, rather go, I can't wait to find my own success. That small ritual changes everything.
So you said something that's pretty important. When you seek, you find. When you're looking for the teacher arrives. But there's a lot of people who have been so conditioned with the day-to-day in the business, and their mind is super, super cluttered, that I almost feel like, sometimes you need an intervention to cut that pattern, right? And similar to maybe like chemical medicine, where if somebody gets sick and they provide you or they prescribe you something to sort of help you, do you feel on the conscious level, there are also tools to intercept or to break the pattern, because you've just put yourself in a shithole, basically, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now I'm referring to plant medicine. Now I'm referring to tools that you use to really, when you know you need help, when you know you need change, but you can't. You can't adopt a new habit. You can't work on something else. And maybe I've kind of experienced that a little bit, where I've had a bit of losses, or major losses in my life earlier on, and I just didn't deal with them. And it was only until I've created a space within myself, using a tool, that then kind of gave me the freedom to experiment, and to be okay with experimenting. I know that you've had experience with that.
So look, we live in a fantastic time where we've got access to teacher plants that for many, many generations were only held to the tribes that practiced them. From South America, the shamanic sort of culture there didn't have outside people integrating themselves into their teacher plant experiences. And it was about 25 years ago that the plants themselves told the shamanic tribes that it's time now to explore and to extend and expand to the rest of humanity. And so we live in this wonderful time where we get access to these thousands and thousands of years old of traditions with these teacher plants. And these teacher plants are the intelligence of plants that are integrated within ourselves, that give us an opportunity to see who we really are, to truly explore our connection to God, and to really give us a subjective point of view from God's point of view of who we are, what our magnificence is, and how the stories we've created are just our conscious mind, not our subconscious, that has got access to so much more wisdom.
And maybe without sounding too religious, but like whether you believe in God or whether you believe in the universe as the creator, it's about tapping into that creation source, right? It's tapping into that energy, the creation energy. And I mean, look, I've had my own experiences with that, and basically being on the same frequency of the universe, in a way, like feeling that you're really one with everything, is a powerful feeling, because it all of a sudden removes, and that's happened to me, it removes the sense of belonging to something, like the way that nationalists would feel the sense of belonging, or even the sense of belonging to like a family unit, or and you really just get integrated with everything around you. So you start caring for everything that lives around you, and you start caring
empathy. You become empathetic to everything. I mean, I became vegetarian after my first experience because I realized the pain. And I wasn't aware of it, and that made me hyper aware of it. But if we just look at what the science is behind these teacher plants, and many of them give us access to our subconscious, utilizing our pineal gland as the radio frequency or the radio receiver, the tuning in of a new frequency. And so this freaks people out, and your ego really doesn't want to be taken part of it, because what you're actually doing is crushing your ego as it stands at the moment. So this elixirs that are released or brought into your system utilizing teacher plants just change the vibrational stance and the radio station that you got access to. And so now what happens is you get access to a parallel universe that is showing you things that show you that what you're worried about in this world doesn't mean anything. It's like you've been caught up in stories that actually are irrelevant, really. And so that perspective of wisdom and that perspective of grand magnificence as we are as human beings get you to relax and get you to realize that, look, what are we running for? What are we running away from? Why are we anxious about these things? Because they're all mental constructs that we've created ourselves that get us to be anxious. Now, the biggest thing that teacher plants did for me was open my heart and release my mind. And so that really, taking you out of this analytical mind to a conscious excitement heart space, really releases so much creativity, releases so much pain. It just changes the way, the dynamics of how you go about making decisions.
True. Have you noticed, and you've worked a lot of, let's say, company leaders and, thought leaders in their fields and stuff like this, and have you noticed people who've had those experiences, who've connected with plant medicine and those elixirs, let's say, that have changed their perspective on the way that they do business, on the way that they, make plans within their organization? Have you seen a connection there?
Well, look, it is, and the magic of the universe is that you automatically arrive at these people that have also done that. I mean, look at you and me. Exactly. You and me connected. And people, doesn't matter where I'm in the world, it's this slight connection and all of a sudden you're talking the same language. And so really what I think is like, I don't even have to seek. It just arrives. It's a tribe. It's a global village. And so you vibrationally are connecting with people that are on the same vibration. Now, as leaders, you have a 180-degree shift in how you go about understanding the world you live in, because you realize you can and have always been tapping into an endless stream of abundance, an endless stream of creativity. So immediately what happens when you have access to that is you become so calm and being collaborative, because it's obvious to be collaborative. When you haven't done that, you are in a space of scarcity and you're like, no, there's not enough creativity that I've got access to, so I have to IP my stuff, I can't share my stuff, and what you're actually saying indirectly is that I've reached the pinnacle of my genius and I'm not going to have access to any more, so I can't share it. And what this does, it opens up this new access to creativity, and so it just becomes obvious for you to be collaborative and sharing, And so a lot of people say to me, is like, I've released my books now onto LinkedIn because I'm like, I've got more books coming, so why would I want to just protect these all the time, So
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of learning there, and I feel like for the people that haven't really experienced self-awakening or self-realization or letting go of their prejudice, of their conditioning, we deserve it as human beings.
Look, it's a very painful process, and we also have to become clear on that, is that if you haven't done it, you're living in a painful world. And if you are going to do it, you're going to have to go through pain. And I think one of the most painful things is releasing who you were to become who you need to be, and to let go of everything that you knew and all the prejudices you carry, to be able to now move into a world that you're not that person. Wow, that's tough, because you have to let go of family, friends, environments, jobs, create all of it. You have to let go of. And Dr. Joe Dispenza has a fantastic line. He says, if you think about your past and you still hold resentment or anger towards certain people, you haven't evolved, because you're still your old self, not your new self. So if you're holding on to those hooks, you haven't evolved. And that's such a great sort of point for you to measure how you've grown, because if you think back on somebody who hurt you and you're still holding on to that, you're still who you were, which means you can't create who you need to become. So forgiveness, which is such a cliche sort of statement, it's like forgiveness is your gift. And while growing up I was like, yeah, forgiveness, but that bastard there, I'm not him. Everybody else I can forgive, not him. And now I realize it's just my own subjective story I've been holding on to for years and years and years. I've created this poison within myself just because I didn't want to let go of it, because my ego wants to feel fulfilled in how it's grasping that. Yeah,
it's insane. I feel like we can go on about these different topics, but I hope if people are taking, there's going to be a lot of gems from this conversation, from using meditation as a tool to self-realization, to even using like stuff like plant medicine as interventions. But it's also letting go of the fear of trying new things. You know, the actual anxiety of experiencing things where you feel, oh, it's not for me, that's not really who I am, and just go out there and experience things out of your comfort zone. I think that's where life really starts beginning, is on the other side of fear.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think society, religion, family, culture kind of holds us into what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And we must never mistake teacher plants with drugs. And that must be a big realization, because drugs is to escape your reality. Drugs is to numb your reality. Teacher plants is to go into your reality, is to explore deeper into who you are. It's exactly the opposite. And so what people do is they teacher plants drugs. No. They're exactly the opposite. And trust me, you cannot get addicted to teacher plants, because it is a incredibly difficult process to go through. You get maybe addicted to the fact that when you come out of that experience, you are a brand new human being with a brand new perspective, with 20 tons of emotional states taken off you. And so that becomes something that I seek constantly, because like twice a year I'd like to experience teacher plants if my calendar allows it. Twice a year I want to do Joe Dispenza meditation retreats, because both of those give me an opportunity to recalibrate, redesign, and re-energize my focus and my energy, you know?
Yeah. Appreciate your time, and thanks for catching up, man.
Yeah.
It was good.
Thank
it was
you
good
so much
catch up.
for that. Thank you. Thank you.